Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. Introduction. The Root of All Suffering. Welcome to this comprehensive summary of Joseph Nguyen's transformative book, Don't Believe Everything You Think. This book presents a radical yet simple truth. The root cause of all psychological and emotional suffering is believing our thoughts. Nguyen begins with a powerful premise that we are not broken and don't need fixing. Instead, we need to understand a fundamental misunderstanding about how our minds work. Most self-help approaches focus on changing, controlling, or managing our thoughts. This book takes a completely different approach, understanding that thoughts are just thoughts, and we don't have to believe them. The author shares his personal journey from anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation to discovering a profound truth that changed everything. This wasn't about positive thinking, affirmations, or cognitive techniques. It was about recognizing the nature of thought itself and how our experience of life is created from the inside out, not the outside in. The central insight is deceptively simple. Your thoughts create your feelings, and your feelings create your experience of reality. When you understand this deeply, not just intellectually, but experientially, suffering falls away naturally. You don't have to fight your thoughts, change them, or believe them. You simply need to see them for what they are: temporary mental events that come and go like clouds in the sky. Chocolate. Part 1. Understanding the Nature of Thought. The inside-out paradigm. Most of us live our entire lives believing in an outside-in paradigm. We think our feelings come from external circumstances, our job, relationships, bank account, or what people think of us. This creates endless suffering because we're constantly trying to control the uncontrollable external world. The truth, Nguyen reveals, is that we live in an inside-out reality. Our experience of life is created entirely through our thinking in the present moment. It's not the situation itself that determines how we feel. It's our thinking about the situation. This isn't just philosophy. It's the fundamental mechanism of how human experience is created. Consider two people in identical situations, perhaps both stuck in traffic. One is calm and listening to music. The other is furious and stressed. Same situation, completely different experiences. Why? Different thinking. The traffic didn't create either person's experience. Their thoughts about the traffic did. Thought as the universal constant. Every single human being experiences life through thought, 100% of the time. There has never been an exception. You cannot feel your job, your relationship, or your circumstances directly. You can only feel your thinking about those things. This is the most overlooked, yet most significant fact about human psychology. When you deeply understand this, it changes everything. You realize that when you're feeling anxious, you're not anxious about the future. You're experiencing anxious thoughts in the present moment. When you're depressed, you're not depressed about your life. You're experiencing depressed thinking right now. The circumstance and the feeling about it are two completely separate things. The illusion of content. We spend our lives focused on the content of our thoughts, trying to solve problems, figure things out, and analyze what we're thinking about. But Nguyen points us to something more fundamental: the fact that we're thinking at all. Understanding the mechanics of thought is more powerful than understanding any particular thought. Thoughts are temporary, constantly changing mental events. They have no inherent power except the power we give them through belief. A thought believed creates an entire world of suffering. The same thought seen clearly for what it is, just a thought, passes through harmlessly. Think of thoughts like weather patterns. You wouldn't believe that a cloudy day means the sun has disappeared forever. Yet we do this with our thoughts all the time. We have a dark thought and believe this is now permanent reality. Understanding that thoughts are transient by nature brings immense freedom. The present moment. All thinking that creates suffering is about the past or future. Anxiety is thinking about a future that hasn't happened. Depression and regret are thinking about a past that's already gone. Peace exists only in the present moment, and the present moment contains no inherent problems, only what is. When you're fully present, without thought-created stories, there's only now, and now is always okay. It's our thinking about now that creates the experience of suffering. This doesn't mean bad things don't happen in life. It means our suffering about them is optional and created by thought, not by the events themselves. Part 2. The mechanics of suffering. How we create our own hell. Suffering is a completely inside job. We create it through believing thoughts that aren't serving us, then adding more thoughts about those thoughts. This creates layers upon layers of psychological suffering that seem very real but are entirely self-generated. Here's how the cycle works. A thought arises, often automatically. We believe it. That belief creates a feeling. That feeling seems to confirm the thought was true. We then think more thoughts about the feeling, creating more feelings, in an endless spiral. All the while, we believe this is happening to us, not that we're creating it through the mechanism of thought. For example, someone thinks, "I'm not good enough." They believe it. This creates feelings of inadequacy. They then think, "Everyone else has it figured out," and "I'll never succeed." Each thought believed adds another layer to the suffering. Before long, they're experiencing what feels like an objective truth about themselves and their life, when in reality, it's just thoughts believed. The addiction to thinking. We've become addicted to thinking, believing it's how we solve problems and navigate life. But most thinking, especially repetitive, anxious thinking, doesn't solve anything. It simply creates more noise and obscures our natural clarity and wisdom. Nguyen explains that we have two types of thinking: productive thinking that helps us navigate practical tasks, and psychological thinking that creates suffering. Psychological thinking includes worry, rumination, judgment, comparison, and storytelling about ourselves and our lives. This thinking serves no useful purpose except to create feelings of anxiety, stress, and dissatisfaction. The irony is that the more we try to think our way out of psychological suffering, the deeper into it we go. Trying to solve an anxiety problem through more thinking about the anxiety just creates more anxiety. It's like trying to clean dirty water by stirring it. You just make it muddier. Misidentification with thought. One of the deepest sources of suffering is misidentifying ourselves with our thoughts. We think, "I am my thoughts," rather than, "I am the awareness in which thoughts appear." This creates a prison where every negative thought feels like a statement about who we fundamentally are. When you believe you are your thoughts, you take them very seriously and personally. "I'm not good enough" becomes an identity rather than a passing mental event. "I'm anxious" becomes who you are rather than an experience you're temporarily having. This misidentification makes thoughts feel solid and permanent. The truth is that you are the constant awareness that observes thoughts coming and going. Thoughts appear in your consciousness like images on a screen, but you are the screen, not the images. This recognition creates space and freedom. Thoughts can come and go, but you remain untouched, like the sky remains clear behind passing clouds. The search for external solutions. Because we believe our suffering comes from external circumstances, we spend our lives trying to rearrange the external world. We think, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, find the relationship, lose the weight, make more money. This is the hamster wheel of conditional happiness. But since our experience is created through thought, not circumstances, external changes provide only temporary relief. The promotion feels good for a while. Then new thoughts create new dissatisfaction. We're chasing a feeling we think exists outside us when it can only ever come from inside. This doesn't mean we shouldn't have goals or improve our circumstances. It means recognizing that our well-being doesn't depend on them. When we understand this, we can pursue goals from a place of inspiration rather than desperation, and enjoy the journey rather than postponing happiness until some future achievement. Part 3. The Path to Freedom. Seeing thought for what it is, freedom doesn't come from controlling, managing, or changing thoughts. It comes from seeing their nature clearly. When you see that thoughts are just mental events with no inherent truth or power, they lose their grip on you automatically. This isn't an intellectual understanding, it's an experiential recognition. It's the difference between reading about water and being wet. When you truly see that a thought is just a thought, it doesn't need to be fought, changed, or believed. It simply passes through your consciousness like a bird flying through the sky. Nguyen emphasizes that this seeing isn't something you do. It's something that happens when you're open to it. You can't force yourself to see thoughts clearly any more than you can force yourself to see an optical illusion differently. But when you're pointed in the right direction and stop trying so hard, the seeing happens naturally. The intelligence behind thought, beneath the noisy chatter of our psychological thinking, lies a deeper intelligence, what Nguyen calls wisdom, intuition, or innate well-being. This intelligence guides us perfectly when we're not caught up in thought storms. This wisdom doesn't come from analysis or figuring things out. It arises spontaneously when our minds are quiet. It's the flash of insight that solves a problem you stopped trying to solve. It's the gut feeling that guides you in the right direction. It's the creativity that flows when you're not forcing it. The more you understand that you don't need to believe every thought, the more you naturally settle into this deeper intelligence. You begin to trust the quiet space between thoughts rather than the noisy content of thinking. From this space, life becomes simpler and clearer. Solutions appear without effort. Decisions become obvious. The futility of resistance. One of the key insights is that resisting thoughts, trying to stop thinking, or fighting with your mind creates more suffering, not less. What you resist persists. When you try not to think about something, you end up thinking about it more. Instead of resisting thought, Nguyen teaches recognition and allowance. Let thoughts be there, but don't engage with them or believe them. They're like background music, present but not commanding your attention. When you stop fighting your thoughts, they lose their power and fade naturally. This is radically different from most psychological approaches that teach you to challenge thoughts, replace them with different thoughts, or control your thinking. Those approaches are still operating from the belief that thoughts have inherent power and need to be managed. Understanding that thoughts are inherently powerless unless believed removes the need for any management. Living from understanding. When this understanding deepens, life transforms not through effort, but through a shift in perception. You naturally experience more peace, clarity, and well-being because you're not creating suffering through believing every thought that passes through your mind. You still have thoughts, often the same thoughts as before, but your relationship to them changes fundamentally. A thought like, "I'm not good enough," might still appear, but instead of believing it and spiraling into insecurity, you recognize it as just a thought passing through. It has no more power over you than a cloud has power over the sky. This understanding isn't something you achieve once and then it's done. It deepens over time, revealing itself in layers. Each time you see through a thought you previously believed, you become a little freer. Each time you recognize suffering as thought created, you step a little closer to your natural state of well-being. Part 4. Common misconceptions. It's not about positive thinking. This understanding is often confused with positive thinking, but they're completely different. Positive thinking tries to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. This is still operating from the belief that thoughts create reality and need to be controlled. The understanding Nguyen teaches is that thoughts, positive or negative, are all just thoughts. You don't need to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. You need to see that thoughts in general don't have the power you've been giving them. This frees you from the exhausting effort of trying to control your thinking. Sometimes positive thoughts arise naturally. Sometimes negative ones do. Both pass through. Neither defines you or your reality unless you believe them and build a world around them. This is much simpler and more sustainable than trying to maintain positive thinking all the time. It's not about never feeling bad. Understanding the nature of thought doesn't mean you never feel negative emotions. Feelings are a natural part of being human. The difference is that you don't add suffering on top of feeling bad by believing it means something's wrong. When sadness arises, it's just sadness. When you believe thoughts about the sadness, this shouldn't be happening. What's wrong with me? This will never end. You create suffering on top of the sadness. The sadness passes naturally when you don't add thought-created layers to it. This understanding also doesn't mean you become indifferent or don't care about life. Actually, the opposite happens. When you're not consumed by psychological suffering, you have more capacity for genuine care, compassion, and engagement with life. It's not about controlling circumstances. Some people misunderstand this teaching to mean that if you think the right thoughts, you can control external outcomes. This is another form of magical thinking. Understanding that your experience is created through thought doesn't give you control over the external world. Bad things still happen. People still die. Relationships end. Jobs are lost. The understanding is that your well-being doesn't have to be destroyed by these events. You can experience sadness, grief, or disappointment without the added suffering of believing it shouldn't have happened or that you can't handle it. This creates profound resilience. You navigate life's challenges from a grounded place rather than from the reactivity of believed thoughts. You respond with wisdom rather than from panicked thinking about what things mean or what might happen next. Part 5. Practical implications. Decision-making. When you understand that thoughts are just thoughts, decision-making becomes simpler and less agonizing. Instead of endlessly analyzing and worrying about making the wrong choice, you can make decisions from a clearer space. You recognize that the anxiety about the decision is just thought, not useful guidance. When your mind settles, the right choice often becomes obvious. You trust your deeper wisdom rather than the noisy debate of anxious thinking. This doesn't mean you don't think things through or gather information. It means you don't mistake anxiety and overthinking for thoughtfulness. There's a difference between productive thinking that helps you evaluate options and psychological thinking that just creates stress. Relationships. Understanding thought transforms relationships. You realize that when someone upsets you, you're experiencing your thinking about what they said or did, not the actual effect of their words or actions. This doesn't mean their behavior is okay, but it means you can respond rather than react. You also stop trying to control others or needing them to change for you to feel okay. Your well-being doesn't depend on them behaving a certain way. This paradoxically leads to healthier relationships because you're relating from wholeness rather than neediness. When you understand that your partner's mood or behavior is coming from their thinking, not from you or your relationship, you take things less personally. You have more compassion and less reactivity. Conflicts decrease because you're not adding thought-created drama to every interaction. Work and performance. Many people fear that if they stop believing their stressful thoughts, they'll lose motivation or become complacent. The opposite is true. When you're not paralyzed by anxiety or driven by fear, you perform better. Creativity flows more easily from a clear mind than from a stressed one. Problem solving is better when you're not caught up in worried thinking. Productivity increases when you're not constantly distracted by psychological noise. You can still have ambition and goals, but they come from inspiration rather than from believing you're not good enough without achieving them. This is a much more sustainable and enjoyable way to work and create. Mental health. This understanding has profound implications for mental health. Many conditions like anxiety and depression are perpetuated by believing thoughts and then thinking about those thoughts. Breaking this cycle through understanding can provide relief where other approaches haven't worked. This isn't a replacement for professional help when needed, but it addresses the fundamental mechanism of psychological suffering. When you see that anxiety is thought in motion, not a disorder you have, the experience changes. When you recognize that depression is an experience created by depressive thinking, not a permanent state of being, it loses its grip. Conclusion. The simplicity of truth. Joseph Nguyen's "Don't believe everything you think" points us to something beautifully simple that we've overcomplicated. Peace and well-being are our natural state, obscured only by believing thoughts that aren't true. This isn't something you need to achieve, earn, or work toward. It's already here, underneath the layers of believed thoughts. It's not a matter of having the right thoughts or controlling your mind. It's about recognizing the nature of thought itself. The invitation is to look in a new direction, not at the content of your thoughts, but at the fact that you're thinking. Not to analyze why you think what you think, but to see that thoughts are temporary mental events passing through your consciousness. When this understanding deepens, life doesn't become perfect, but your experience of it transforms. Challenges still arise, but suffering becomes optional. You still feel emotions, but they don't define or destroy you. You still have thoughts, but they don't control you. The beauty is that this isn't something you need to practice or maintain through effort. Once you truly see that the emperor has no clothes, that thoughts only have the power you give them through belief, you can't unsee it. The understanding deepens naturally over time. You don't need to believe everything you think. In fact, you don't need to believe any of it. You can let thoughts come and go like weather, while you remain as the unchanging sky. This is freedom. This is peace. This is your natural state, always available, never actually lost, just temporarily forgotten when you believe the thoughts passing through. The transformation isn't about becoming someone different. It's about recognizing who you've always been beneath the believed thoughts. Whole, complete, and fundamentally okay, no matter what thoughts are arising in the moment.